Hi, I'm Andy Power. You join me here at Larford Lakes today where I'm going to run you through my tactics for winter feeder fishing. So we're just coming into winter now. This week's been the first of the really hard frosts. It's been really cold every night. So whereas maybe a month ago you'd catch on bombing pellets and feeding a bit of bait, now the carp are really sort of slowing down and shutting up shop, and you're looking to maybe fish a method feeder and create just that one pile of bait for the fish to go over, or maybe an opportunity take rather than feeding fish. So to target carp, I'm going to be fishing a method feeder or a banjo feeder with just 2mm pellets around the feeder and a really simple bright hook bait. I've got myself some orange wafters, mega bright, and a few different colours. Yellow can be quite good this time of year. I've also got the real deal, a grain of corn instead. That could be a great target bait. Just that when the carp are sort of swimming past, it gives them something to go at. So a bright hook bait can be really important. It's worth having a play because sometimes one colour in particular really works better than the others, so it's worth playing around with those. Then moving on to my skimmers. I fish a lot of matches at Larford through the winter. We've got golden rod qualifiers, starting a few silverfish matches now, so skimmers can be like the main species if you like, if the carp aren't playing ball. So to target them, it's normally a conventional feeder. Ground bait choice, I've got F1 Dark, which is all I use through the winter basically for skimmers. It's just a nice low feed ground bait. It's nice and dark, so the fish sort of feel comfortable feeding over in clear water, and it's got a nice sweet smell that skimmers seem to love. Another baits I've got with me, I've got a kilo of worms. I probably won't need it now it's really cold, but sometimes feeding a few worms through the feeder can pick out the bigger fish, if you like, the bigger proper bream. You don't have to feed a lot, but just having that tiny bit in the feeder can sometimes stir a few fish into feeding. So I might not start by feeding worms, but I've got them just to play with and see how they respond. I've also got some dead rum maggots, great skimmer bait. They're probably what I'm going to put on hooks, so I like to put a little bit through the feeder if I can. With it being cold, it might be that red pinkies are a better option instead. They worked really well for me last year, especially putting red pinkies through, because it gave me the option of maybe putting a fluoro pinky on the hook as a standout bait. Same goes for red maggots. I've got a few fluoro maggots with me just as a change bait. That could be a good option, but with it being clear, red might be the better option anyway. As for transporting them to the bank, I just keep them in a plastic bag. I bought these probably a week old now, but they've been in the fridge and they will come round, but I just put a little bit in the tub at a time and they take a few hours to come round, so they're good as dead if you like, but I can do anything with them. I can bring a few round if I want to. That's how I transport them to the bank. I've also got a couple of pints of casters. I've turned these myself. I bought some big white maggots from Viaduct Fishery and turned them in the week just for today, nice and fresh. With these, I'm probably going to feed these at the start, maybe put a volume of bait in on a shorter feeder line with maybe a few chopped worms in as well. Might not be too positive because it is cold now, but with that line I'm going to feed that at the start with plenty of casters and leave it alone for a few hours with a view of catching bigger fish late. Sometimes if you feed a line and leave it for a few hours, then bigger fish can settle over it, and it happens quite a lot here at Larford. I fished a festival a week or two ago, and I did that at the start. I probably fed two pints of casters and plenty of worms. Obviously that was milder then, but I fed that at the start, left it for a few hours, and I caught some really big quality bream over in the last few hours of the match. So just by feeding that, leaving it alone, it's not sort of doing any harm with your other feeder lines if you like, and you're not losing anything by doing it because it's well away from your other line, and hopefully you should catch fish on the longer line throughout the day and maybe drop onto that and catch some bigger fish. So I've got some casters. It's worth mentioning, although I've sort of confused it if you like with loads of different baits, I know how I want to fish, if you like. Ideally I like to fish maybe just maggots through the feeder and fish it simple as that, but you've got to cover your options. It might not be the best bait on the day, it might be worth feeding pinkies instead, so I'll have to play it by ear. I've got these baits to cover my options, which I think is really important. One final point is bait preparation. Starting with my ground bait, obviously I mentioned I'm using F1 Dark. You can mix it the night before, but this ground bait in particular is quite dead and inert, so it doesn't matter if you do mix it in the morning. I did actually mix it last night. I really over wetted it, so it looked a complete mess basically, but the beauty of this ground bait is it mixes really well. You can add loads and loads of water to it, leave it alone, and then put it through a riddle, and it's really nice and fluffy. So that's how I did that. Really over wetted the ground bait, left it alone, riddled it, job done. And then I've also got micro pellets for the carp. All I did with these, they're fishery 2mm pellets. I just soak them for 2 minutes 30. I just use a stopwatch every time, so I know it's the same every time. Soak them in water and then drain them off on a riddle and leave them alone, and an hour later they're perfect. I'm just going to talk about rod choice for here at Larford on the Specie. For carp, I've only set one rod up. It's an 11.6 Superior, and I can do anything with this on this lake if you like. I can cast to the middle, no problem. It's probably only 60 metres to the middle at the widest, probably not even that. So this is like really comfortable with this rod. To be fair, I can comfortably cast sort of 70, 80 metres with this rod, but I don't need to here, and this is just comfortable. But even if the fish were closer, I'd be comfortable, underarming this rod just close in, which is a good tactic here anyway. But with this rod, it's soft enough that I can fish close in, and it's nice for playing fish sort of at close range really, if you like. And if a carp bolts off, I've got lots of length in the rod to sort of keep up with it and cushion it, if you like. So I've got that rod that can do everything really. I've got a 5000 centris reel. I've just got £8 straight through. I mean, if I was going further, I'd probably use like £4 with a shock leader, but for here there's no need to go that light really, because you're not casting that far. And the beauty with the £8 main line is once you've cast out, I think it sinks and lies better on the bottom. It's a heavier line. I think that can make a big difference when carping your peg feeling the line, if you like. I think they know what's going on when the line's in the water, so if you can pin it down, that's great. Moving on to my skimmer rods, I'm going to feed two lines today, one about 16 metres and one about 30. For the short line, I've got a 10'6" Dutch Master Sentient, which is a nice, really soft rod. It's got a nice fine super feeder tip, so I can use really light tips if you like. I've got a 3/4 ounce in today, which should be about right. It's a little bit of toe. For main line, I've only got £3 sinking feeder mono, which might seem quite a bit light to some people, but I'm a big believer in using the lightest I can get away with. I'm not using braid because this will sink a lot faster and I'll be fishing a lot quicker than braid. It cuts through the surface tension. It's only 0.16, so I'll be fishing straight away, and with it being a low diameter line, there's less stretch and you can see a lot more bites. I think that's really important. A lot of anglers maybe don't get that and they use heavy main line which has more stretch, and you don't see the bites like you do with a low diameter mono line. Obviously braid will show up more bites, but this is just nice for fishing close range. You're down, you're fishing, there's no messing around sinking your braid. If I was fishing sort of more than 30 metres, say 40, then I would use braid because you can see more bites at that range because there is more stretch in your mono main line. So I've got a 10'6" on that line, and exactly the same setup on the 30 metre line, but it's 11'2", just give me that little bit more power to get that comfortable distance. There's a bit of a wind getting up as well, so that should be comfortable on that line. I've also set up today a feeding rod. I mentioned before I'm going to probably feed that short line really positive. So I've got a nice 10-foot carp rod to cast big feeders like this. That's what I have been using, but it's been bitterly cold, so I might drop down to a feeder like this. I still want quite a bit of bait in, even though it is bitterly cold. I just think feeding that short 16 metre line, there's no loss in putting bait in because it will catch further out. So that's my rod setups. So where am I going to fish? First of all, my skimmer lines. In my head, I know I want to fish sort of 16 metres out and maybe another line at 30. I think a lot of bait goes in about 30 metres, you know, with bomb and pellets. I think that's a natural place for skimmers to sit on this lake. So I'm going to clip my rods up at 30 and 16 on the measuring sticks to be nice and accurate. You know, if I hook a carp and after one clip, I can go back to the sticks and be on the same spot. So I'm going to measure with the sticks first, and then I'm going to put a bomb up, cast out, and see what the bottom's like. And I might change my mind if it's, say, a bit snaggy, and then by casting with a bomb, it gives me an idea what bottom I'm fishing on. Is it silty? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it gravel? And then it gives me a picture of where the fish want to feed on a particular day. Sometimes, you know, a soft bottom can be good, but when the fish are feeding really well, especially maybe on that short line, I might want to fish on a harder bottom, so I might come in a couple of metres, but we'll see when I plumb up. So that's how I'm going to find my spot on the skimmer lines. For my carp fishing, I'm not actually going to cast out at all. I don't want to spook them by putting a bomb out and putting lines in the water before the start. All I'm going to do is cast short and work my way out and try and find where the fish are. Look for liners, maybe catch a fish short, maybe go a bit further, and then follow a fish around my peg. I'm not going to clip up to one spot because it is cold and they're not really going to come to bait. It's just going to be an opportunity bite, if you like. So I'm just going to try and find a few fish and play battleships. Right, I'm going to show you how I use my measuring sticks. They come in 3 metre lengths, I think, but I actually shorten mine down to 2 metres because I find it easier to use and wrap round, can stand still, and I can count with 2 metres at a time better than I can with 3. So it keeps it simple for me. Just make sure they're in nice and tight, and then what I do, I've got a bomb on at the moment, but I'm just going to clip it under this piece of string like that, nice and secure, and I count 2 metres at a time. So I'm going to clip this rod at 30 metres. I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 30. I'm going to clip up there. And it's just a case of winding it back again. I find I've tested this before. You could have the same reels, the same line, clip up, if you count your turns and clip up 2 reels at the same distance. And then I've had it where I've laid them out on the bank side by side and they're totally different, even though they're the same reels and the same line. Yet some will have a tiny bit more line than the other reel and it'll throw it out, if you like. By doing this, it's so much more accurate, and you know, it's what I've been doing the last few years, and I think it makes a big difference with accuracy. So I've just clipped up at 16 metres on my clip and I've put an ounce bomb on, and if I cast out now, I've just found that at 16 metres it's actually quite silty. I'll let that hit the bottom and I'm going to slowly ease it out. If you notice, it sticks. It's not moved yet. Now it's moved, that's telling me it's quite soft. But if I come back another metre and clip up, it's actually quite hard, so I'm going to fish there instead at 15 metres. I'm going to come back about a metre, but I'll measure it in a minute. I'll show you the difference there. So I'll let that hit the bottom. I'm going to move it slowly out, and it's dead smooth, so that's hard bottom and not the silt. So I'd rather put a quantity of bait on that hard bottom, and I think they're going to feed a bit more confidently over a big bed of bait on a hard bottom than they will in the silt. So let's get fishing. Right, I'm going to talk you through the bait I'm going to feed at the start. I've actually measured out a pint of casters into a tub with maybe 100 ml of chopped worm, finely chopped. I was here a few weeks ago and I fed probably 2 pints of bait at the start and left it alone. Obviously it's got a lot colder now, so I'm going to probably go for about a pint. It might overdo it, but we'll have to see. But you know, by being positive on that line, then I'm not really losing out because I can go further. So I've measured that into a tub, and that's what I'm going to feed. I'm going to plug it with F1 ground bait with a big bait up feeder. I'm going to feed that at, well, it was 16 but it's now 15, obviously because I'm fishing on that harder bottom. So that's what I'm going to do on that line. The other feeder line at 30 metres, I'm not actually going to put any bait out. I'm going to probably start fishing, but because I'm going to have a few chucks for carp and see if I can catch a few on the method feeder first, I'm probably just going to put 3 or 4 tiny little plug-it feeders with virtually nothing in, a few maggots, maybe a few pinkies, just so there's something there when I drop in, but there's not too much bait that it overfeeds them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to pre-bait any carp for any carp lines. I'm just going to chuck short to begin with and work my way out and see if we can snare a few and find a few liners. Run you through my setup for carp. On my rod I've got a large link swivel. It's important it's a big strong one because it's going to be under a lot of pressure. I'm going to use elasticated feeders today, which I prefer when I'm using, well, casting a long way really, because there's going to be so much slack line on the bottom. I want that fish to hook itself against the feeder and not the rod. And if I was using an inline feeder in that distance, there wouldn't be so much of a bolt effect. So with this I can cast it out and just leave it and know that it's fishing properly with an elasticated feeder. I'm actually using the standard ICS stem, which has a 12 hollow in. It's maybe a little bit light if you were bagging on carp. I'm not expecting the fishing to be that frantic. I'm expecting 1 or 2 fish, and if I do catch a skimmer it's going to be perfect with that 12 hollow in as well. So the actual feeder choice, obviously with an ICS I could put anything on it. I could put a method feeder, a pellet feeder or a Banjo. I'm actually choosing to fish a small Banjo feeder today, a Dura Banjo. The reason behind that is so my bait is contained. Obviously it's quite deep here and I want my bait to get to the bottom, which it does more so with a Banjo than a method, and it's a tighter little pile of bait. Obviously it's got a lot colder now and the fish aren't really attacking the feeder, they're just, you know, it's that opportunist bite, that little pile of bait, and I want them to take my hook bait in. So with a Dura Banjo there's that smaller pile of bait and it's walled, so it's going to get to the bottom and I know it's fishing. I mean, today I might be leaving it out sort of 20 minutes for a bite and I need to know that it's fishing properly. So that's my setup for that. As for hook lengths, I've got a 4-inch hook length of 017 power and a 14 kkmb hook. Nice big strong hook, but I'm fishing wafters as well, so that's going to counterbalance the weight of that hook, and it's a reliable strong big hook for anything. It'd be perfect for skimmers or a 20-pound carp if I do happen to hook one. So that is my setup. So I've explained why I'm using a Banjo today. Obviously I've got another few options in the ICS range. I've got a method feeder and a pellet feeder. Typically I'd use a method feeder in generally shallow water. Obviously I know the bait's getting to the bottom because it's not that deep and the fish can attack it from all angles, so it's better maybe in the warmer months when there's a lot of fish in your swim and they're more likely to attack the bait, rather than, you know, an opportunist take on the Banjo feeder, just a small pile of bait. With a method they can get it at it from all angles and attack it. With a pellet feeder it offers a different presentation, if you like. The bait's contained in one area and the fish haven't got a choice, if you like. They have to take your hook bait to take the loose offerings. There's only one angle they can get to it, so sometimes switching to a pellet feeder can get you, you know, a few more bites than maybe a pile of bait where it can be spread around. Maybe when there's a lot of fish in your peg, you know, they can waft your hook bait around and it's not contained in that little pile as it is with a pellet feeder. So that's, you know, a few different options that I've got depending on the scenario I'm fishing. Really important item I have in my box is a stopwatch, especially this time of year when you're waiting for bites. It's amazing how often your bites happen at the same time. Maybe they all happen at, say, 6 or 7 minutes. Then it gives you an idea of how long to leave the feeder. The other thing is, obviously when you're waiting and waiting, time seems to sort of drift on by. 2 minutes can feel like 20 minutes, and when you're fishing without a stopwatch you can make that mistake of casting too often, which is not really what you want to do this time of year. You want to make the minimum amount of casts, less disturbance and more time in the water, just being patient. Obviously when you're casting regularly, you know, you're creating different piles of bait in your swim and you're sort of blowing your peg, if you like. But by working your way out and, you know, leaving it there for say 20 minutes at a time, you're really working your swim better that way. So here at Larford today I'm using 4-inch hook lengths. It's 4-inch minimum fishery rules, so that keeps things simple for me. Where often I quite like to use a 3-inch. I think that creates a bit more of a bolt effect, if you like. There's less play and I think I catch more fish because of it. But here today 4-inch is the one. As for line I use, in the summer it'd probably be either 0.17 power or probably more likely 0.19, to be fair, nice and strong. But here today I'm quite happy to drop down to 0.15. I think even if I do hook a carp it's going to be quite sluggish, so I'm not afraid to drop down to 0.15. As for hooks, simple KKMB. I'm using a 14 today, but I'm quite happy to step up to a 12 if there's a lot of carp there, or if I'm struggling. Maybe I can drop down to a 16 and maybe change my hook bait to maybe even an expander, just to try and catch skimmer or something like that. I also like to have my tip quite low to the water. That creates less of an angle and keeps the line, you know, close to the lake bottom, and it's less likely that the fish is going to feel the line when it's close to the feeder. I think that's quite important to, you know, slacken off a little bit so that, you know, that there's not a tight line at an angle to the feeder and the fish aren't going to feel it. For quite a few years I didn't believe in flavours or additives at all. I just thought it was a gimmick and caught more anglers, but the last few years has completely changed my mind, especially this time of year. I think when it gets a bit colder, carp senses sort of shut down a little, and by having that bit of flavour on your hook bait, I think it gets you more bites. In terms of flavours, generally during the winter I like more sweet flavours. I think they make more of a difference, and during the summer maybe more fish meal and meaty sort of flavours. So here today I've got an F1 lava and a 24/7. This 24/7 in particular reminds me of when I used to go carp fishing. I used to catch loads of fish on this particular flavour of boilie. It's not this flavour, but it reminds me of that, and by using this it gives me loads more confidence. You know, waiting that 20 minutes for a bite, when I've got something like this on it and I've got faith in it, you know, confidence is everything. So I've caught a few carp early, but that's dried up a little bit and I think it's time to have a look at the skimmers. I've started on the long 30 metre line. Ooh, and I'm getting quite a few small fish. I've started off putting a few maggots through just to sort of feel my way into it, if you like. I'm struggling to feed small fish off at the minute, so I'm going to change from feeding maggots, and I've started putting worms through, and I'm hoping that's going to, pick out some better fish, hopefully. And looking at the amount of indications I'm getting, I'm quite glad that I've put a volume of bait in short, because hopefully that's sort of one spot there's a lot of bait, and hopefully some big fish will settle over that. But at the moment I can't really feed these small fish off, but obviously I've just switched to putting worms through, and hopefully that'll make a difference. Just feel it way to the bottom, sink the line on the rest and just slacken off the tip so I can see the bites. See if this makes a difference. Indication straight away. So obviously a lot of fish there at the minute. It's just finding a way to get those bigger fish feeding. I'm going to talk to you about my rig today for skimmer fishing. Here at Larford you're allowed fixed rigs, so I'm actually using a paternoster rig. I find that more sensitive anyway, and by preference I would always use a fixed paternoster for skimmer fishing. So what I've got is a 3-inch loop in my main line where my link swivel goes, and to that I've got my feeder attached. My feeder, I'm just using a small 20 gram plug-it feeder, smallest feeder, goes in with a nice little plop, and that should be a nice size. If I'm really struggling I can drop down a feeder size again. I've got a few little homemade ones made out of rod tubes basically, and that's a nice little feeder from the middle of winter when it's rock hard. So that's how I've attached my feeder. Where my hook length is attached is further up on the main line. I've got a quick release swivel in between 2 beads just to fix it in place, and that creates a really sensitive rig, and it's also really anti-tangle because it spins around and it doesn't really tangle. For my hook length I've started with 18 inches of 011, and I've started on a size 14 SFLB hook, nice lightweight hook, really sharp. I've started on a 14 to begin with just in case I hook a bigger fish, but it's a nice size anyway for small skimmers, but I will drop down to a 16 if I need to, and that's my rig. So to begin with I started off on the smallest plug-it feeder, which is still quite a decent sized feeder. The reason for that is I want to put some bait in for this at the start. At the moment I'm getting a lot of small fish and indications, and I kind of want to feed them off a bit. by fishing that bigger feeder and putting that bit more bait through, and hopefully I'll get some bigger fish settle. I mean, when these small fish stop, I could drop the feeder size to, like I said, something like that, made out of a pole tube, nice and small, goes in with a nice plop, and it's not going to spook the bigger fish once they're there. But at the moment I'm happy plugging away with a bigger feeder, just put some bait out. Oh. Because these small fish are a little bit ravenous at the minute. There's a little skimmer, I think. Might be a roach, a skimmer. Still a nice sized fish though, but this lake's full of big bream, so I kind of want to catch them really, but one of them every put in. Still put a weight together. So at the moment there's still a lot of small fish in my peg. So pinkies are a bit of a no-no, so I've been alternating between maggots and red worms. At the moment worms are picking out the bigger fish, but I keep dropping back to maggots just to see if I can get away with it. I think once those small fish disappear, I think maggot's going to be the best hook bait, but at the minute it's just trying and find a way of picking out a bigger fish in amongst all those small fish. So at the moment I'm getting bites pretty much within seconds of every chuck, but normally I'd like to use a stopwatch if I can leave it in longer than that. Sometimes you might find your bite comes after 90 seconds, or it might be 3 minutes. So that gives you an idea of how long to leave your feeder in for. If your bites are coming sort of every 3 minutes, it's worth, leaving it for 4. But if every bite's coming within 90 seconds, then you're better off chucking it every 2 minutes really. At the moment, I'm getting bites pretty much straight away as soon as the feeder lands. So I don't need to use my stopwatch. But hopefully these smaller fish will back off a little bit once the bigger fish move in. And we'll be able to leave the feeder in a bit longer. So I've been fishing away for skimmers, but obviously now it's later in the day, there's always a good chance of a carp again. So I've just gone back to the Banjo and it's gone round pretty soon. It's obviously the time of day. Obviously early on you're going to get a few straight away and then they'll back off. But obviously by leaving them alone, and partly because of the time of day, they always feed later on, just as the sun's coming down a little. The light levels are dropping and they normally have a bit of a feed. Feels like a decent fish as well actually. Nice mirror. So this was a match, 2-3 big fish like this at the end can make all the difference. Oh. Lovely fish. Well, it's an awesome day's sport. We've had a few carp early on the method feeder, plenty of small fish on the feeder in between. Big fish haven't played ball, bream wise, but I think that's due to it being cold at night and probably a bit too flat, calm and bright for them to feed properly. But I've had loads of little skimmers and roach, the odd better fish as well, which is, great for this time of year, and a few bonus carp late. So really good day really. I am Andy Pandy, Puddle and Pie. Kiss the girls and then cry. Believe me, a fine main line makes a huge difference. So I've only got £3 sinking feeder mono on that. Minnow. Sinking feeder minnows. Because you do see that bit more. Dead. It's a bit colder now, and I think I might need to be a bit more careful with a bit. Right, I like to tighten into the feeder and then slacken off, so make sure that line's sort of lying on the bottom. Right, a really important item of tackle during the winter when you're waiting for bites is a stopwatch. It's amazing how often you can time your cast and your bite will happen at the same okay. Really awful. It's shut down a little bit, and by having that bit of flavour, a bit more attraction on your feeder, I think it gets you a load more bites. Today I caught a couple of fish on this 24/7 goo, and it's a flavour that I've used quite a bit. I used to dribble on quite a bit. I didn't like that. Right, I'm going to talk about my rig today. Here at Larford you're allowed fixed rigs, so I'm actually using a paternoster. I think that's far more sensitive than, say, a running rig or even a running paternoster. I prefer the sensitivity of a fixed paternoster.